I've been reading a lot. I've read something that you've done as well as some others, and um, I've spoken to some other photographers about this. Is and I don't know what we would call it, but let's call it a project. And you might want to enlighten us with a different term if there is one. But I think I was turned on to this when I was looking at some of the Lenswork magazines and looking at some of the beautiful photography in there where somebody would spend 5 years photographing the inside of a power plant
Mm-hmm.
or, coming back to the same place numerous times and, photographing things and making it a project, whether it's a project of photographing, a single flower in a vase or, a man-made landscape or something else. You've published a number of books and a number of other things. I don't know whether you call these projects or how about it, but talk to us a little bit about this. How can you take somebody who goes all over the place taking pictures and make everybody focus or somebody focus down, mainly because I need this, maybe I have ADD in photography or something, but, give me some insight.
Well, a lot of people use their camera when they travel and maybe don't use it at home, so they're going to this place and they photograph that subject, they go to another place, it's another subject. And when I was teaching field workshops for about 15 years, I had students that would come to a workshop in Yosemite and then maybe they'd go to a workshop in Death Valley. And so I'd see their work over several years. And I was surprised I wasn't seeing the evolution I thought might be possible. And after those years of teaching, I started thinking of how people could avoid that problem of being scattered. And so my concept is, not my concept, but the way I talk about it is thinking in themes. And I teach an online class where I do this. It's called Portfolio Development, and it helps people decide what inspires them the most and spend time photographing that in a focused manner, whether it's a flower for 1 month straight or 5 years or however long. It's a focused body of work, and it helps you focus your energy because we're all doing many things in our lives. And so when you come to, say you photograph waterfalls in the Rockies, and then you come to Yosemite, you say, well, I have this thing about waterfalls. I love waterfalls, so I'm going to go see the waterfalls wherever I go. And it doesn't have to be a place-oriented theme. It can be waterfalls everywhere I've been, and you make a collection in Lightroom, for example, and you can start to organize it and say, there's my best waterfall photographs.
So in somewhat these themes and
then you keep adding to it.
So these themes and projects, do they come after an effect of actually taking a photograph? So, okay, I notice I have a lot of waterfalls, I can make a waterfall project, or do you go ahead early on and say, I want to photograph, trees or branches and leaves over moving water? I mean, how do you go through a process to define this? How do you do that?
For me, it's just evolved, and it's like you said, looking back at what you have, and I have lots of pictures of this subject, that subject, and so I want to do more of that. I like where it's going. So, if you go to a new location, I'm going to photograph that subject at that place. For example, for me, patterns is one of my main subjects. So going to Antarctica, seeing patterns of ice, was just right up my alley. And I photographed ice a lot, in other places. But this was kind of an epic scale.
So that kind of fits in that thing where we were photographing, the pattern of the water before it went over the fall yesterday. So these themes are continually evolving, and they never come to a conclusion.
Well, sometimes they do. I've stumbled into some book projects, sometimes initiated by other people, sometimes by myself. My Yosemite book, I initiated the project. I had 15 years, by the time it was published, 18 years of photography, and I wanted to put it into a book, and so I proposed the book, and that was, obviously the theme. Another book I did was called By Nature's Design, and I fell right into that through a museum in San Francisco called the Exploratorium. I already had tons of pattern pictures, so I was able to go into my archives and make use of photographs I'd been taking for years. Through the writer, I was assigned subjects to photograph, and added to that theme that was already sitting within my library and focusing on what the writers wanted to talk about.
Let's take this whole idea of a theme, and I don't mean to harp on it, but a lot of me is thinking a little bit about, okay, I want to start develop some themes for projects that I'm working on. Where in that process do you determine whether the print's going to show up on an electronic version of, say, a website or an e-publication or a book or a wall? How do you go about figuring all those things out? Or is that part of, I suppose one of the dilemmas I have, and let me kind of regress here, I keep on constantly asking myself this question: now that I got it, what do I do with it? Because there are so many more people enjoying photography these days, and I see them come on these workshops, and they take marvelous photography, and they walk off, and other than basically having them on their computer and knowing that they photographed them, a lot of them don't have an approach to take it to some sort of finality, if you know what I'm saying. Whether it's a display in the simple family room of their home, or a book, which I showed you a little version of a book, which I'm kind of thinking of now for all my projects. But let's talk a little bit about that. How would you help the readers and the viewers get to a point of, getting these images that they managed to photograph, like we've been doing for the last few days and over the next few days, and doing something significant with them, and coming to something where it can be seen and not just stored, if you know what I'm saying, in regards to how it's stored on our medium. So,
well, a lot of people have the desire to show their work, and how they do that, depends on their interests and their ambitions. The great advantage these days is that you can create an online portfolio and share your work with the general public if they find it, or share it with your friends, or share it to a possible gallery. So starting with some of the basic options, web gallery is easy to do, but what has to be thought about in any project is how you edit it, because most people are not very good editors.
Looking at
one
of them.
If you're going to put up an online portfolio, or whatever it might be, an exhibit or some other outlet, this is especially true with a web gallery, you can put up 100 images. And it can be a few good images, or it could be all good images, but the level of your photography is going to be determined by how well you edit it. So if I show you 10 of my best landscape photographs, and that's how my work is perceived, then that's, the judgment of that is what the level you're at. But you can't lower your standards. You have to have an ongoing process of building a theme up, where you have the idea, okay, here's my patterns collection of images, and I have all my 5-star images, there's 20 of them. If I put in 5 that are weaker than those 20, my level as a photographer goes down, just simply based on my editing, because there are weaker images in there, if I'm the decider of that.
Okay, let's get into what it takes to make a 5-star image. I tend to have a lot of 4 stars. I really, I need help here, okay? And I think a lot of other people do too, because I know I sit down and have a dinner with some of my photographer friends, and we all have a whole lot of images, but I think what we're missing is some quantitative way or definitive way to decide what it makes, that 5-star. What are the elements, for example, if I can use that word, or what are the pieces that determine this is a 5-star keeper? Enlighten us into how and what you look for when you go that way.
If you're doing a landscape portfolio, the basics of any good photography are going to be a well-designed image in great light. So if you're photographing Yosemite and you have all the graphic elements, you have a great composition, this is balanced here and that foreground is complemented by that background, and the light is fairly good. Say like this morning at the tunnel, it was nice, but it wasn't great, then you'll have a nice picture of the tunnel, and it's not like a morning in Antarctica when the light was epic and the subject was epic, and so does that match up? So then you have to have the discipline of not expanding it to a portfolio of 100, but keeping it to a portfolio of 20 or 30 or something where whatever level you're at, when you add images, it doesn't dilute it, doesn't drive the level down.
So sometimes the evolution of your own photography is actually raising the bar of where you determine the 5-star, for example.
The perception of your photography is going to be based a lot on your editing. So, but as far as the quality of the image, it has to have all the parameters of sharpness and good exposure and great light and beautiful design and clean, simple communication.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of putting a lot of images up on the web because I just think they look really good. And somebody once told me, said, you know what? Just put 20 up there. They're never going to know what the other 80 that you didn't put up look like. But make sure they're the best of that 100. And it's something I'm getting better at. But I'm telling you, this taking the pictures is the easy part. Making the image and working that image, I think I've gotten down to the point where I can pull everything out of the image that I want and even figure out how to crop it. But when I'm done, I just look at it and go, God, there's a whole bunch of good ones here. And I'm not raising the bar as high as I should. There was a guy on the Antarctica trip, you might remember, when we did the introduction, the guy goes, yep, and I'm so-and-so, and I only have 2 5-star images in my whole life. I hope I can come away with at least one from this trip. And I think he said, oh my God, I got like a whole bunch. But man, that person really had some high standards.
Well, you asked earlier about, what are you going to do with the work? And I struggle with that because I'm creating the work faster than I can ever do anything with it. And, outlets for your photography are hard to find. So you have to have some reasonable expectations of where you might be able to show it. Most people I recommend starting locally, trying to get local exhibits and build up a reputation, build up a body of work, and that the force behind an exhibit, as an example, is the editing. And sometimes you put something on the internet, it's on a fairly small monitor, not like the size of a print, and you go to print it and you go, there's some things I need to work on. So, getting it print ready is another level.
I know in my little gallery that I have, and I had my first opening this year, which was a lot of fun. But what I saw was people all of a sudden, everybody shares with their iPhones and iPads. Oh, look at this image. And even you were sharing some images with me over the last few days that way. But when I watch people walk into the gallery and, see the acrylic prints or the mounted aluminum prints, or even the ones that were really, museum matted on the wall. And I even was working with some new paper that Epson came out with, a textured watercolor exhibition paper. And it's got a tactile feel, which just invites you to go up and touch it. One of the things that I saw, and one of the things that I see in your work, that you can't see on a computer screen, is what I now call immersive imaging. Meaning, is if you can put something up on the wall that begs you to kind of, you stand back and you look at it, and then your eye sees something, and you take a step forward and another step forward. And one of the things that I enjoyed watching is, and because this is the first time, that I've had a chance to do something like this for many, many years, is watch how many people walk right up to put their nose almost against the print because they're seeing something in it. It actually has stopped them and drawn them in. I know with a couple of your images,
slows them down.
Well, is that well? Yeah, but it makes them look. And so many times when we're watching and seeing electronic images, it's so quick. I mean, if you look at Facebook, and both of us post pictures on Facebook and share and like each other's pictures quite a bit, but you're getting hit with a huge volume of images and a stream of images, and you've got to have something that wants to make you stop and look at it. I think that's another one of those elements that we've got to incorporate into our standards as far as elevating it to a shower or a keeper or whatever we'd like to determine it. Somehow or rather, you seem to have mastered that, because when I looked into your portfolio of images in the gallery, just amazed every time I turned a page. It was an exceptional image. And that part, and I'm sure there's a lot of other images behind there that, you probably had 1 out of 100 or 200, who knows what the ratio is. But the thing is, I don't know what your rejects look like. And I think this is the thing that we've got to be aware of as photographers, is nobody knows what you're throwing out. People are only seeing what you're keeping, and make sure that you're keeping the best that there is.
Right. And that's an important discipline. It's also an important discipline behind the camera, because people don't see what's outside the frame. So they're condensing the experience. You're talking about a print, but also how you focus on what was really important in the image to you. If there's a little leaf on the side, but you really want the eye drawn to a certain area, maybe the little distraction on the side shouldn't be even in the frame. That's where I end up zooming in and trying to condense the essence of what made me want to take the picture.
You kind of did that with me this morning. There was a shot I was taking, and came over and looked at it and go, well, this tree over here, you either got to have it in or it's got to be out. And you saw that instantly, that quickly, which I felt was okay. That was pretty good suggestion.
It's what I call decisive cropping, and a lot of times, especially with wide-angle lenses, people don't watch the edges as much as they might, and so I've just trained myself to look there, and if you want something in, put it in. Half a tree sometimes looks like you're not sure whether you want it in there, or if the cropping's a little tight along an edge. So that's just something you can work with later on in post if you don't mind cropping, but it's obviously much better to see it in the field. Wow. And be decisive. It doesn't need to be in there. Try it while you're there and see if it helps the photograph or hurts the photograph, and then be decisive with the decision.
All right, so I'm taking away, decisiveness is something of a new non-photographic term which I've got to come to terms with.